So what is a business loss and how can it be useful? Well, for starters, there's two main types of losses. There's capital losses and non-capital losses. Now, a capital loss has to do with capital. So typically meaning equipment, machinery, maybe real property in the form of buildings, vehicles, stuff like that. And so in business, if you have a capital loss, that means that you purchase some capital. Maybe you purchased a work vehicle, a business vehicle for $30,000, and then you sold it shortly after for $20,000. It's worth more than $20,000 on your books, and therefore it's a capital loss for your business. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on capital losses in this video. I'm going to talk about non-capital losses. So non-capital losses, think more of just like business operations. You could incur a business operations loss by having more expenses in your business for a given time period, a fiscal year, a tax year, compared to how much revenue you brought in. So for example, maybe you started your business officially January 1st, 2025, and your fiscal year is just a calendar year. But maybe starting out, you had a lot of expenses. That's pretty common for most businesses. And revenue can be slow to generate, to find customers and clients. So in that year, let's say you had $20,000 in business expenses and you only generated $15,000 in revenue. Then you have a net operating loss of $5,000. And so that's a non-capital business loss. So whether you're in a partnership, a sole proprietorship, a corporation, whatever legal structure, typically you can claim this on the tax return for the business, whether that tax return is a separate tax return for a corporation or whether that's on your personal tax return in the case of a sole proprietorship or a partnership. And it is important to claim that because otherwise you're paying more tax than you're supposed to. It is fair game to claim those non-capital business losses. At least in Canada, I can't speak for the whole world. Every country has different tax policies and rules and things like that. So I do recommend finding a qualified accountant to work with on something like this. If you have a capital business loss or a non-capital business loss, good to work with someone who's a professional in that area who understands the tax rules of your jurisdiction and how capital and non-capital business losses work. But in general, in Canada, when it comes to business, you can claim these losses. And the nice thing is that you can carry them backwards. So you can apply them against past years, and typically you can go 3 years in the past. And then you can also carry them forward. And it can depend a little bit on the industry, but as of now, typically you can carry forward those losses 20 years. And with capital and non-capital losses, they have to be applied in the same category. So if you have a capital loss, you have to apply it towards a capital gain. And if you have a non-capital loss, you have to apply it towards a non-capital gain. So I'll expand on that example of that business that generated $15,000 of revenue and had $20,000 in expenses. So had a $5,000 non-capital business loss. Now let's say the individual who started that business also has a part-time job. They're employed by another company, and let's say they made $30,000 in employment income for the year. Now they had a $5,000 non-capital business loss and they had a positive $30,000 of employment income gain. So if their business is set up as a sole proprietorship, then typically that $5,000 business loss can be applied against their employment income to reduce how much taxable income they have on their income tax. Or if they don't have employment income and that's all the income they had for the year and therefore they're operating at a loss of $5,000, well, they can carry forward that $5,000 loss into a future year when maybe their business has lower expenses and higher revenue and actually has a net profit. Then that $5,000 can kind of be applied as a credit to a future year's non-capital gain through business activity. So hopefully that makes sense. Just a very simple example. Again, I recommend working with an accountant on this if you have more questions or are in this type of situation and need help navigating it. And I will leave some links in the video description below to the Canada Revenue Agency that has more information on these topics. And if you found this video useful, please click like and feel free to check out and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I currently have about 285 videos that cover business management and business startup topics. Many of them are focused on Canadian content and then also some on Saskatchewan content, which is where I'm based.